I kind of feel like if we were to really unify, if we could do it around labor, I think that would go really far. The only issue is that we really have to unify around just union organizers, not union bosses. It's kind of like you gotta skip over them. And I'm sure you guys have that problem with a number of unions in California. Is that anything that you can shed some light on?
Well, so I've been a union member for 30 years. I'm a part of Screen Actors Guild. I'm an actress. Okay. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, it's been interesting to see. It's like the limousine liberal effect, and how many women in 2016 actresses whom I've either worked with or we have lots of mutual friends blocked me because I was a Bernie person and they were all Hillary. And just about, I think 2.5 years ago, because SAG has really good healthcare as part of, if you earn a certain amount, then you get great healthcare. It's like $100 a year and a $10 copay. I mean, it's beautiful. But they changed the threshold that you had to meet. And it's really difficult as a working actor to meet the threshold because, even commercials that used to go to just sort of like nameless actors are now all being populated by big stars. It's really hard even to make, I don't know if it's like $40,000 or $50,000 a year that you have to make, but it's hard to make that even as a working actor. And so a lot of the people who blocked me lost their health insurance a couple of years ago and they're apoplectic. And I luckily have health insurance through my husband, who's a writer, which is also a really good plan. But, it was hard for me not to have just like a slight bit of schadenfreude because they were so disgusting to the one candidate who actually wanted healthcare for all. But you see, it's the same thing that played out in Nevada with the restaurant workers, right? Like the union bosses and the people who are at a certain level of wealth, they were fine voting for the status quo because they thought they were going to have their health insurance forever. And they're not listening to the regular working class. So I do see that playing out in pretty much every union, even though I'm only sort of privy to Writers Guild and Screen Actors Guild.
How would you guys feel about a National Labor Council where basically you had, sort of like a coalition of people all over the country that basically kind of work in concert? And a lot of people talk about the prospect of trying to get some type of a general strike going. Well, I think the only way something like that could happen is if there are organizing, leadership, people in all different parts of the country.
You need a social safety net that we don't have. That's why you can't strike here, because you can't live. You can strike in other countries and still live.
Yeah. The biggest difference between our ability to strike in other countries is healthcare, which is tied to employment. Yeah. That's the number one issue, which is why Medicare for all is like the thing that they're going to fight tooth and nail to the end of time. Because once you untether healthcare to your job, people, it's one thing for me to say, I'll struggle for a while, but it's another thing for me to say my kid won't have healthcare for a while.
Right.
That's a huge difference. So, yeah. But I do think, to your question,
like a working party, or is that what you mean? Like to have a working people's party at the national
we need a
level?
labor party. We need a labor party. We don't have a labor party.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, right now you're going to have so many roadblocks regarding, this whole third party movement that a lot of people think is the pathway forward. And I'm not saying that I don't think that it has merit. You should certainly fight for it as best you can, but we need a rabid outside movement that really has nothing to do with electoral politics. I think if it had really everything to do with labor, collective bargaining, living wage, universal health care, environmental standards, that type of stuff, I think can unify the most amount of people significantly. And for people who don't want us caught up in, let's say, Ukraine, and then next it'll be Taiwan and, God knows what else. If you have a National Labor Council that has the ability to literally shut down the economy and say, this military industrial complex thing, this is over. You're not going to force our hand to continue to pay for these wars, when in reality, we don't have a leg to stand on for our own rights here in the country. So to me, I think that would probably go over very well. And my experience, like I said, just talking with somebody who was a huge Trump DeSantis supporter, but believes in those policies, that's one of many people I've spoken to that feel the same way. And everyone who's like, well, how could you support them? They're not pro-labor. Yeah, neither are the Democrats.
Right. Yeah.
No, I think your idea has a lot of merit. I mean, it just comes down to the devil in the details for sure, because like who sets up that board? So like, does Citigroup sets it up? I mean, this is
Marty Walsh.
This is the problem with it is how we get there. And if
No,
somehow we pass some ballot initiative.
It can't be one person. Like, for example, one person who I would definitely have on that council would be Chris Smalls. Like, he would definitely need to be one of several. But
it has to be comprised of rank and file people.
Yeah.
So I think the only way you get anywhere near something like that is massive striking first, to make that a demand to create this council somehow, or but until we have pressure on them to have any inclination to cave to a smidge of public pressure, which they don't have right now. I mean, we're seeing more of it. They're seeing labor. That's why they're fighting labor so hard. That's why Biden's commissions, his negotiating commissions, are all siding with
CEOs.
So, but I mean, people are seeing that the unions, there's more people are seeing that strikes actually can work. They're seeing that they don't have to they can stand up to their union leaders, like the train strike, potentially. So, those examples will lead to something. But if you're going to get to what you were suggesting, Peter, we have to have bigger victories first. And that has to be like, that won't be created in any sort of even pretense of fairness until it's under massive pressure from something we already exerted our power to get there, kind of like.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. And I think though, and one of the biggest obstacles is, so we're just sitting here watching this video about 48,000 people on strike, but I don't think that's being covered in mainstream media. I'm pretty sure CNN's not like on the ground covering that.
Right.
And so it's hard to even garner generalized public support for labor when you never even hear about it or see it. And they do a very good job at stifling that information. So I mean, we try to counter it, but we're very small. And, but I think the more people that see that and understand what's going on will be supportive of those movements. And it's just a matter of people don't know that that's even happening.
And it's always framed like, well, classes are going to be canceled and the cafeterias will be shut. It's always like how it's going to affect people. And they're never talking about it's because of what the CEOs and the regents at the universities are doing, right? Like, it's never framed that way. It's always framed, the workers are holding out and there's going to be a slowdown if the railway goes on strike before Christmas. Oh my gosh, what's going to happen to all your Christmas presents? As opposed to, why don't we pay them a living wage and give them their time off and get, it's never framed that way by corporate media.
Well, the corporate media does a great job of pretending that Joe Biden is something that he isn't. And very,
next FDR.
Biden's greatest failure as president is labor. I mean, that is his greatest failure. I mean, he's had.
Oh, I don't know. I think foreign policy is up there.
No, I agree.
I've got a list.
Healthcare. I mean,
I'm going to throw COVID out there.
Yeah, healthcare and COVID are like.
He's a disaster.
I would say on the domestic side for sure, but there are people who are.
What's the one good thing he did?
What?
One good thing that I really.
Took us out of Afghanistan?
No. Ketanji Brown Jackson.
Ketanji Brown Jackson on the Supreme Court.
That's the only thing so far.
I'm waiting to see how she votes on stuff, because she's still pretty like in corporate, in the pockets of the corporate. That might be, but I'm just happy that we have a public defender on our Supreme Court. I agree.
And she actually is from Miami, and she was a classmate of somebody that I grew up with down here. And like, she definitely is the real deal in terms of like really coming from a vulnerable place, and she really is that person.
They clearly put her on there to check a box, no question.
Whatever.
But if she does well, then that's what matters.
But the box that mattered to me was public defender. I don't care. Like, that is a huge thing. We've never had that before. So I was pleased with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I also, I mean, I'm very leery. I'm very not trusting of that, because I think it's almost impossible to get vetted that deep into the situation unless they can own you for corporate interests.
Wasn't there some
maybe social issues she could be better on? But I mean, I just think you're not going to get that far down the pipeline unless,
But this also gets back to the big issue of people not wanting to form coalitions with people that they may not necessarily agree with. You see, you have to accept the fact that a significant portion of the working class has been pushed over to the GOP. That's just where they feel at home. It's not a question of whether they agree with their policies. It's just that for their philosophy, they just subscribe to whatever's being espoused by the likes of Trump and DeSantis. That doesn't mean that they believe that women shouldn't have the right to choose. It doesn't necessarily mean that they don't believe in a living wage. It doesn't necessarily mean, quite frankly, one of the biggest things that I do see on the right, Jen has been on a number of shows, whether it was Tim Pool, Michael Knowles. These guys are like rapidly anti-war, like very civil libertarian, and they hate, when I say hate, they hate Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy. Like they really do.
Right.
And so their solution is not Rick Scott, just to be fair.
Right.
But for them,
Voldemort.
We're in a situation, as you always like to say, we don't have a party of labor in this country. If we did, things would look a lot different politically. We have two corporate parties that answer to management and only management.
Yeah.
That's what we got to change.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.